What golden nugget of information do you have to share? Even if you aren't willing to give mouth-to-mouth on an unconscious person, chest compressions alone greatly increase their odds of survival. In case others wondered why, the circulatory system will still have trace amounts of oxygen that can be circulated to the brain via compression, which can make the difference. Edit. A few have mentioned that a non-insignificant amount of oxygenated blood can be present at moment of arrest, a stronger case for compressions. Also because chest compressions naturally push air in and out of your lungs. If you're doing them right. Just to add something very important to this, it doesn't matter if you're doing them right. Wrong chest compressions are still better than no chest compressions in 100% of cases where someone doesn't breathe anymore. Do not hesitate to do them because you're afraid you're doing something wrong. And continue doing them even if you feel ribs crack. It happens. But also hesitate for a couple seconds to make sure they're not breathing first. Edit. If anyone thinks I'm just joking around here because of the derailed comment thread below, I am very much not. It is the first step of CPR and extremely dangerous if forgotten. It's so important that I failed a practical exam because I said I would learn before checking breathing. Edit 2. Just gonna pasting your Crimson Suede's reply to my comment, that, and to those who don't know, always ask, are you okay? Do you need help? First. Sounds counterintuitive cause chances are they can't respond, but it's still very important so as to avoid any problems that may arise otherwise. You should probably even yell the question at them and lightly slap their face as if they're a man on the woman-only cart in an Indian train. Jokes aside, read the situation of course. If they seem like they might have hurt their neck, don't do the slapping part. A scorpion can hold its breath for 6 days, so don't think drowning it will help you out of your scorpion problem. Semen washes off best with cool water. Using hot water can cause the proteins to denature and makes it stickier. For a garment to be labeled made in USA, the process only needs to be started and finished in America. In the case of a certain ladies' underwear line, the material is cut in USA, shipped overseas for assembly, then shipped back to America where a seamstress sews a Made in USA tag on the item. Source: underwear factory worker. It's crazy how it's cheaper to send clothing across the world to be assembled than it is to just do it domestically. A moose can run 40 miles per hour through 6-foot deep snow. Terrifying. JiffyCat.com. Moose, sorry I gotta run. Deer, but what about the snow? Moose, what about it? When choking on food and can't get help, you can get into a push-up position and then just drop down. The ground hitting your stomach and chest will cause what you're choking on to dislodge. Edit. Someone has commented to explain that this was created by a fireman, not something that firemen necessarily do. Edit. Thanks for the gold. Edit. You can also dislodge by jabbing the back end of a chair into your stomach. Please look in the comments for more info. The first president of Zimbabwe was President Banana. Speaking of golden nuggets of information to share, goldfish lose their color if they are kept in dim light or are placed in a body of running water, such as a stream. Also, goldfish actually get very large and live for a very long time, but most people don't care for them properly and end up suffocating them in ammonia. Yep. We kept goldfish in a huge water tank for our horses and they lived for 12 years and got huge. Edit. For those who are curious, the fish were put in the tank to eat the algae and mosquito larvae that can accumulate in large tanks. Mine were 12 and 13. Nobody would believe my parents didn't switch them out when they died, but my parents definitely wouldn't do that, and my mom actively wanted them to die so we could get rid of the tank. I had a heart transplant 5 years ago. When your heart is replaced, the surgeon has to cut the main nerve that gets the signal from the brain to beat, and or increase the intensity of the beat. Without this, vagus nerve, your new heart has no regulation and pumps blood out of habit. You no longer have a fight or flight response and your new heart beats at 90 plus beats a minute. That is terrifying. So if you get nervous, your heart doesn't race. Right. I have no internal regulation over my heart rate. My new heart beats purely from muscle memory. I can't think about it for too long because it's just too freaky. Absolutely terrifying. It is, but honestly, the no control thing is close to the bottom of concerns when having a heart transplant. My big worry was how long will I live post-transplant, and the answer is an average of 13 years. In that average there are people who died on the table and people who lived 30 plus years. My father had a heart transplant at 65 and lived 20 years with it. Died of unrelated issue, the heart was still good. You've got this. Go enjoy your life. Did he pass it along for dirty thirdsies? Could you imagine getting a third-hand heart? Also, sorry about your loss. None of his organs were available for transplant. Too much anti-rejection drugs and his overall age. Thank you for condolences, we feel lucky to have had him so much longer. There are about 60,000 characters in the Mandarin language. A very literate person will know 20,000. The average person from 5,000 to 10,000. If uneducated, around 3,000. I met a German girl who had studied Mandarin in university. She said she knew about 6,000 characters, which was about enough for her to read the newspaper. Which one? The German paper. The main reason we stop doing something we love is because we forget our love of doing it for enjoyment's sake and replace it with the desire to be good at it. You've inspired me. I should go tune up my guitar and get back to playing. I enjoyed it. I was decent, and I should enjoy being decent at it rather than good or great. Gary Newman is 13 days older than Gary Oldman. Each one of the Yamato-class battleships' main gun turrets weighed over 3,000 tons, heavier than the average US destroyer. If you were on a destroyer in the US Navy during World War II, you ran the risk of having to fight a ship whose primary weapons alone displaced more weight than your entire vessel. And the reason for this is that the Japanese Navy had heavy restrictions from the West on how big Air Navy could be before the start of WW II. So to compensate for this, they built the biggest battleships the world had ever seen. Yeah, Washington Naval Treaty. And they were absolutely useless once aircraft carriers became the most effective and valued ships in a fleet, not to mention they couldn't recoup their losses anywhere near as fast as the US could, so every loss really hurt them and they didn't have the resources to actually get the most out of them. Granted, Japan's carrier force was formidable up until the midway happened, but Japan essentially made a perfect sword while everyone else was making guns with the Yamato. Every nation prepares for the last war. Yamato would have been the king of WW1 but was outpaced by technology like planes and carriers. He took command of the 1st Carrier Division in October 1933, and by 1935 was a vice admiral and vice minister of the Imperial Navy. Yamamoto's emphasis on naval aviation intensified, and he clashed with traditionalist colleagues who argued for more battleships. Yamamoto had little faith in such venerable behemoths. They are like elaborate religious scrolls which old people hang in their homes, he said, as a matter of faith, not reality. In modern warfare, battleships will be as useful to Japan as a samurai sword. When fellow admirals called for a program to build 2 gigantic battleships, saying that only a battleship could sink a battleship, Yamamoto resisted. He quoted an Oriental proverb, "The fiercest serpent may be overcome by a swarm of ants." He was right. but massive amounts of resources were dumped into two monster battleships that basically did nothing and get destroyed. Artillery was responsible for over 70% of combat casualties in both world wars. And 4% of the sand on the beaches of Normandy are still made up of shrapnel n.m.wikipedia.org. That is mind-blowing. Really drives the point home how it must have been hell on earth. I remember I went on a school trip to Normandy for a few days. We went down on the beaches and our teacher told us to have a piggyback race from the shore to the cliffs. Was so tough and so far. The piggyback was to replicate the weight of someone's full kit. Plus the fact that we didn't have machine gun fire or artillery or barbed wire or mines to worry about. Can't even imagine how insane it was. One of my friend's great-great-grandfather fought at Gallipoli in WWI, and he would have to sometimes sprint up 45 inclines with a full kit, while shooting his rifle at the enemy while also being shot at by machine gun fire. He ended up being wounded by friendly artillery in one of the battles and almost lost his leg and half of his forearm. He got sent home. In a way, he counted himself lucky, because the next battle his company would fight in was at the Battles of the Neck, and almost all of those he fought beside were slaughtered as they charged the Turkish trenches. And only 55% of Anzacs returned from Gallipoli. I had a customer come into my store with an Iwo Jima hat on. I was gobsmacked. He didn't have much to say about it, sadly. I didn't push him on it, but his grandson pulled me aside and told me he was in the first wave to hit the island. He came out unscathed, but lost most of the people that went in with him. I have tremendous respect for people like your friend's great-great-grandfather and the guy I met. I do everything I can to talk to the few vets I come in contact with. Unfortunately, there are few and far between now.